on Sunday. Props and ops. Sitting pretty on a Monday. Props and ops. You know it's betting and beer with props and ops and props and ops.
NFL Week 15 prop bets. Hitman, I know we're entering the time of year where weather becomes another big factor to monitor in a lot of these games. So as you look across this week's slate, I was wondering if you could kick us off with a bit of a handicapping weather 101, if you will. Just how much does weather factor into your process, especially from a prop betting perspective?
The wind is the biggest deal. It's more important than snow. It's more important than rain. Now, when rain and snow will play an impact is when it's torrential downpours or when it's multiple inches of snow. That's going to affect the offenses. But a lot of times it doesn't play as big of a factor, rain and snow, as much as people would believe. It would be the wind and the cold weather. I mean, it decreases scoring a little bit, but nothing really compares to what the wind does. But my best recommendation for playing props with weather concerns is typically if you're going to bet an over, you kind of want to wait until the day of the game and just ensure that weather isn't that bad. And because it's one of those things that, let's say you bet Stephon Diggs over in the Buffalo game 2 days out, and his number was a little bit low at one point. It was like 68.5 or something, and it's went up a lot since. But if you bet that over 2 days before, you're taking a risk, because if the day of the game, if there's news about, hey, there's going to be 6, 7, 8 inches of snow and there's 30-mile-per-hour gusts, you have a lemon on your hand of a bet. So usually with weather-related props, it's usually under or nothing until you can ensure that the weather is going to hold up. And then if it's going to be better than expected, then feel free to fire overs on game day.
And when it comes to getting a grasp on how the weather is going to hold up, I don't want to nudge you to reveal too much as far as your edges go. But as far as sources are concerned, I think for the casual bettor, it might be worth noting weather.com, probably not the best place to look for anything like in-stadium conditions. Is there anything that you can share about sources people might want to consider as they're evaluating factors, especially like a lot of wind we're looking at on this weekend's card?
Yeah, I mean, it helps to have people with boots on the ground and everything. But you know what? There's so much good information on Twitter nowadays it's really not necessary to have somebody there. You as long as you do the digging, you're usually going to find a good report. Like I remember before that Buffalo New England wind game last year, everybody was posting the videos of the goalposts were shaking and everything. They were posting pregame videos of kickers trying to kick, and they were coming up short from like 35-yard field goal attempts and everything. So usually social media in this case can be your best friend.
Social media, something a lot of bettors might want to keep an eye on with a few games on Saturday. We've got a triple header on tap, and we'll touch on a couple of those games. Keeping with the theme of weather, Baltimore at Cleveland, wind, the top factor you just identified, has been a bit of a moving target as far as what the conditions will be like in Cleveland during this game. And Hitman, when it comes to the game day news that you get regarding the wind, how is that going to inform your prop betting approach for Ravens-Browns?
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm hearing right now, the wind isn't supposed to be as bad as it was supposed to be a few days ago. So, I mean, obviously things can change, and Cleveland tends to be a really windy stadium. But I'm hearing that it's not supposed to be as bad. One prop I'll touch on in that game that I played and I like quite a bit is Amari Cooper under 57.5 receiving yards. So Cooper has that hip injury, and nobody really knows how healthy he was. I mean, he was a legit game time decision going into that Bengals game. He ended up only having 2 catches in the game, and that was in a game where Deshaun Watson had a lot of pass attempts. And Amari Cooper has some pretty big splits from warm weather to cold weather. He grew up in Florida, and he's just hasn't had good production throughout his career when the elements have gotten tougher. And although there might not be as much wind as we hoped for in this game, it's going to be a really, really, really cold game. So you have that factor. You have the fact that it's a 37 total. I know Baltimore is a pass funnel defense, but the Browns, I mean, they're a good rushing offense. They're not going to just stop running the ball, especially as 3-point favorites going against Tyler Huntley. And plus you have Njoku back into this offense, just another target. And he was the guy that got most of the usage from Watson last week, as well as Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I thought that Cooper under 57.5 was a pretty strong bet this week.
Love it. One game in, one prop bet worth getting into the portfolio, already in the fold here. And let's see if we can add perhaps another one or two actionable bets as we look at the nightcap on Saturday. Miami at Buffalo. Hitman, a lot of talk this week about the league solving the Dolphins offense. I've got to think Mike McDaniel is going to adjust to the league's adjustments to him. And that could translate to more checkdowns, perhaps less involvement for the Dolphins wide receivers, perhaps more usage for running backs and tight ends in the passing game. I'm thinking that with Hill's ankle injury, we know he's going to play, but especially if he's not at 100%, that could further nudge Miami in that direction. Also factoring in weather. In this game, the Dolphins not built for the elements so much, especially with Tua's arm strength. So I'm looking at a few numbers. I'm just going to run by you here and see if any of them resonate. Tyreek Hill under 76.5 receiving yards. And I'm seeing quite a bit of variance there, as much as 80.5 available if people want a look at the under. Jalen Waddle under 56.5 receiving yards, or looking at the tight ends, Mike Gesicki over 15.5 receiving yards for reduced vig, -105, some even money out there. Also Gesicki receptions over 1.5. It's juiced a little bit heavily at -135, but if the Dolphins are going to use the short passing game, that might be something that Tua is going to be more inclined to take advantage of in terms of connecting with Gesicki. With the running backs, I'd love to get some numbers on them, but with Jeff Wilson Jr. being questionable, nothing yet. So also wondering what we might see at some point on Wilson and Mostert once Wilson's status is confirmed. Hitman, a lot of passing options for the Dolphins offense that I just touched on. Any of these numbers or angles standing out to you as far as the nightcap on Saturday's triple header?
It's tough. I did play some Tua unders, but those numbers have moved about 6-7 yards right now. Still leaning towards Tua unders at 236.5. I know that, I mean, the line's been adjusted. His average number most weeks is in the high 260s. And I know last week it closed in the 280s, but that was a game with 54 total, shootout potential. I mean, that was different circumstances, I think. So usually his average numbers in the 260s. We're getting a number that's a lot lower, but am I positive that's been adjusted enough? It's probably going to depend on the weather. I mean, you see so many reports with there could be the lake effect, snow and everything. There's going to be, the wind is going to be bad. It's not going to be like so bad that you can't throw in, but it's not going to be ideal. But you just add that potential wind onto the fact that they're saying there could be multiple inches of snow. And what did I say? Like, snow flurries are fine. A little bit of snow is fine. But when you get into the conversation of like 5, 6, 7 inches of snow accumulating during the game, it's going to affect the passing game. It just is. So I think that you probably should wait until you're really confident in the weather, but I think that Miami passing game unders are probably worth a look. I know that the big thing that they've been pushing is that they need to take advantage of the shorter passing game this week, and they can't continue to throw deep, and Buffalo's a team that's not going to allow many deep passes to begin with. So that would help the yards a little bit if Miami is going to be throwing shorter, going on these longer drives. They're going to need longer sustained drives. They're probably going to look to run the ball more, a lot of screens, short passes. And then with Tua under too, I mean, the narrative's out there where he's not good in bad weather. So you're paying a little bit of a price in the number betting under based off that narrative. But I think it's probably a true narrative. I mean, the 3 lowest QBR games of his career have been in bad weather games. And I know a lot of guys I respect, like film guys, will say, like, just watch him in bad weather. Like, watch him against Tennessee last year when it was raining. He just doesn't have the natural arm talent that really can drive the ball in these bad conditions. I mean, he's an accurate quarterback. He's a good ball handler, a good decision maker typically, but he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. So I think that you could only look towards some Miami passing unders. And if the weather is really bad, these might get even lower.
It sounds a bit counterintuitive at first glance if we're talking Miami passing game unders, but any thought as to Tua completion overs? I'm not seeing numbers on that yet. I'm a bit surprised, but maybe you know why that could be. I think, though, if there are a lot more short passes, that could lend itself to more completions, even if we're not seeing as much yardage or explosiveness out of those completions.
I mean, I'm probably not going to be on it unless I'm really confident that the weather is good. But I'll put it like this. If you do think that the market's overreacted on Tua and you want to play some overs, play the completions over. That's the better look. Or play the attempts over. And if you like Tua under, I would play the yards under.
Got it. Well, a refreshing change of pace as we flip over to a Sunday game. Weather not a concern in the Dome in New Orleans. Saints hosting the Falcons. First career start for Desmond Ridder. And one of the common talking points for this Falcons offense, Ridder likely going to be more inclined to at least take some shots downfield. And that might lend itself to some upside for a guy like Drake London. I'm looking at his receiving yardage lined at 39.5, longest reception lined at 18.5, the over slightly juiced to -120. Hitman, any thoughts on upside for Drake London in the Falcons receiving game, knowing that there's a new quarterback under center this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variance. I think that London does get a slight bump. His target share was a lot higher last week. He's in a matchup against the Saints where you're 4-point underdogs, probably going to have to throw a little bit in this game. And if there is any type of volume in this passing game, London's probably going to go over because, like I said, his target share was really high last week. You have no Kyle Pitts, obviously. There's no other quality receivers that the Falcons have. So not opposed to it. I would endorse a Drake London. It has been bet up a little bit. It opened in the mid 30s. It's up to 39.5 now, but I'm not opposed to it.
Something else I don't think you'll be opposed to, we can use Chiefs Texans to talk about the MVP market a bit. And Hitman, I don't think you'd be opposed to anybody who's looking Mahomes' way in the current marketplace. It's shaping up to be a bit of a two-horse race at this point, kind of a Mahomes versus Jalen Hurts battle. And first and foremost, PSA for markets like this, shop around. Recently, I've seen circa hanging Hurts -140, Mahomes +170. And then at a book like DraftKings, Hurts -175, Mahomes +200. So with a lot of volatility in pricing from book to book, always shop for the best number, especially in a market like the MVP award. Hitman, that said, what's your point of view on the current betting market? Kind of, again, Mahomes versus Hurts, if you will, when it comes to the MVP this season.
I bet Mahomes 2-1. I kind of view it as maybe Hurts should be a slight favorite. I think that the circa pricing is closer to more accurate on this. So wasn't my biggest bet in the entire world. There's so much change that can happen in this market. But I think it was important to get in front of, if you're going to bet Mahomes, to bet it before Hurts has that Dallas game, because that's going to be a national TV game, and Dallas is going to be a 2-point favorite or whatever it is in that game. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL. That's probably going to be a game that could make or break Hurts's MVP campaign. I know with these awards, so much of it is recency bias. And I know Mahomes has a really easy schedule to close the year. Hurts has that Dallas game, which could theoretically be a struggle. Now, if Hurts lights it up in that Dallas game on a national stage, our Mahomes bets could be in some trouble. But if you assume that Dallas can contain him a little bit and Mahomes has this easy schedule starting off with Houston, I think it's worth a shot at 2-1. I mean, with the way that the standings are breaking right now, Mahomes is probably going to end up having to play in Week 18, would be my guess, where Jalen Hurts is very likely not going to be playing in Week 18. So that's just another week of stats that Mahomes could accumulate. And Mahomes is pretty close. Like, he's really close on pace at throwing for the most passing yards in a season in league history. Now, I know it will be a little bit of an asterisk to it because it's an 18-game season, but if he puts up the counting stats that he's probably going to put up, where he's going to lead the league in touchdowns, yards, might have the most passing yards ever. I mean, everybody knows that he's the more valuable player to his team than Jalen Hurts. Like, let's be real. With Gardner Minshew, they make the playoffs still. And without Mahomes, this Chiefs team would be garbage probably. But yeah, so I think Mahomes 2-1 is worth a bet. It's a price bet.
I had a few follow-up questions in mind, and you ticked off pretty much every single one in that answer. I guess that's why you're one of the best in the biz when it comes to this stuff. But I will still check in with you on a couple of quick things. Number one, you mentioned timing the Eagles with that big matchup against Dallas next weekend. I'm wondering if it's worth holding off just for a few more days before betting Mahomes. What do you think about the fact that, yes, Houston, a very favorable matchup for Mahomes this weekend, but perhaps an even more favorable matchup for Jalen Hurts against the Bears? So the odds, if anything, after this weekend might move a bit further in Hurts' favor before that pivotal Eagles-Cowboys game. So maybe looking for Mahomes' value to peak after Week 15 and seeing better odds on him a few days after this weekend's games are in the books.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I mean, I think it's a better matchup for Mahomes than it is Jalen Hurts. I mean, and then even if you just look at the line, I mean, they're 5 point. They're favored by 5 points more. The Chiefs are than what the Eagles are. So I mean, if one of those quarterbacks did have a poor game and lose to one of those teams, it would really hurt them in the MVP race. But I mean, the Eagles, I think, although I don't think either team's going to lay a dud or either quarterback's going to lay a dud, I would say that Hurts is more likely to lay a dud in 20-degree weather, maybe some wind in Chicago as a 9-point favorite than what Mahomes would be as a 14-point favorite in a dome against Houston.
Tough to argue against any of that. Last thing I want to note when we're talking MVP odds here, because it's a fascinating conversation that's getting a lot of bettors pretty riled up, I think. We're dealing with an award that is voted on, of course, by humans who aren't all as analytically savvy. And I feel like a game last weekend, Mahomes played great overall, but threw 3 interceptions. Some people might have some PTSD from the AFC Championship game. So I wonder if some voters might be more inclined to turn on Mahomes if there are some turnovers that Jalen Hurts isn't making, even if Mahomes is agreed to be the best player almost unanimously. Voters oftentimes will look at certain metrics that might be less impactful, but they could use that against somebody like Mahomes. And ultimately, sometimes awards like this come down to, on one hand, we've got a guy who we know is the best player, but on the other hand, a guy like Jalen Hurts might be a better story, and that's what voters can gravitate toward. Any concerns about that type of element in this voting process?
Yeah, I mean, there could be voter fatigue for sure, but I think that's accounted for in the market right now. I mean, nobody is saying, I think, that Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback or is more valuable to his team than Mahomes. So I think that's accounted for a little bit in the market right now with Hurts being the favorite. But again, Mahomes' counting stats could be so high that I think that's going to be tough to vote against him if he does end up leading the league in passing yards or the most passing yards of all time. And by the way, as we're doing this, a little breaking news. Did you see that Mike White is going to be out for this game for the Jets against Zach Wilson? So I'm sure that line's going to move. I would guess the Jets are 1.5-point favorites now. I would guess that they'll probably become like a 1-point underdog or something. I actually did hear, if you heard me with TA on Edge Rush, I kind of hinted at, if anybody could go back, listen to Edge Rush, I hinted when we were talking about the Jets game, I hinted that, Mike White, like I heard that he might not be 100% with this rib injury. So if I do bet the Jets, I kind of want to wait until I know that he's cleared. And it turned out to be true. I think that this could be a 2-3 week injury, what I heard with Mike White. So his status for next week against Jacksonville, I think, is going to be in question also.
I appreciate all the context there as I frantically scramble to try to bet anything as we're talking, but it looks like the books are aware of it as well at this stage. So especially by the time anybody hears this, there's going to be a new line on the board for Lions Jets, but not looking so great for anybody who might have put down any money on the Jets yesterday, like I did, assuming White wouldn't be 100%, but pretty confident that we would see him nonetheless. That might also have a slight impact on the teaser options for this week, as the Lions were plus 1.5, but we'll get back to that in just a moment. One game that doesn't have any breaking news, Hitman, as far as I'm concerned, but as always, correct me if I'm wrong here. Sunday in the late window, Titans at the Chargers. As far as I know, from a point spread standpoint, we are both on my Chargers at a cheap -3. That does make me feel pretty uneasy. Over the years, I feel like when I'm just ready to fade the Chargers for whatever reason, that seems like they're doing their best in those types of roles. More comfort talking through some props with this game with you. And I want to look at the Chargers on offense, a pretty beleaguered Tennessee secondary that's not so great even when it's at full strength, against the Chargers passing game that has gotten back to full strength very recently. So I want to run some potential overs by you, see if anything stands out. Justin Herbert passing yards over 301.5. I know that's a high number. I also know this is a pretty juicy matchup. Keenan Allen receiving yards over 71.5. Mike Williams receiving yards over 65.5. I have one more alternative angle that we can touch on in a bit, but Hitman, of those three matchups, Herbert 301.5, Allen 71.5, Williams 65.5. Any of these yardage numbers worth considering to the over, or is it just a point where the number and the market have caught up with this matchup all together?
I want to play Herbert over. I really do. I mean, everybody knows the Titans are forcing the most pass attempts in the league. Their pass funnel defense. And Herbert's line is just so high now, and so are these receivers. And I'm just a little worried about playing like a Mike Williams over, just because I'm a little worried about him re-aggravating that ankle. The high ankle sprain is an injury that typically you can re-aggravate, and you saw him re-aggravate it against the Chiefs when he came back a little early for the Chargers. So I'm not betting the unders, but I just think that the overs are a little accounted for in this one, as much as I want to play some overs for Justin Herbert in this Chargers pass offense.
Yeah, I thought that might be the bottom line with this concept. So one alternative I'll run by you, possibly going back to the well with Austin Eckler rushing yards under. That was a close call, but a winner last week. This week, the market has adjusted a good bit. He's down to 40.5. But any thoughts, if the Titans are going to be such a pass funnel, on Austin Eckler rushing yards under that number of 40.5?
Just accounted for. Last week, his number as a 3-point underdog against the Miami Dolphins, who are also a pass funnel defense, it was 48.5 at one point, and it closed like 45.5. And now you're playing under 40.5 in this matchup as a 3-point favorite. I mean, it makes sense, but a lot of these lines are sharper this year. I've told everybody that the lines have gotten sharper. Still very beatable, but they have gotten sharper. And this is an example where I can't play Eckler under 40.5. And it's accounted for.
Fair enough. Well, there are a few bets that we can get down on, and we'll get to that in just a moment. First, one order of business to take care of. Want to remind everybody, Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. And with Thrive, you can eliminate hours of research and focus on the top tier players that have the biggest impact on the game. Here's how it works. Choose 10 out of the 20 available player props to build your lineup. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based on how likely it is to hit. Hit the most props and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And speaking of that prize pool, Thrive has over $200,000 guaranteed in prizes weekly. To get in the game, download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Use that promo code HAMMER for a 100% instant first deposit match up to $100 when signing up today. And Hitman, for Thrive Fantasy players, prop bettors alike, some intrigue when it comes to any picks that you're ready to lock in for the Props and Hops Week 15 portfolio.
Mari Cooper, under 57.5 receiving yards. Like that bet quite a bit. And then for another one, I'm looking at some of my portfolio right now. Let's go with Devontae Smith, under 55.5 receiving yards. Game we didn't touch on. But In 5 of the 6 games leading up to the Dallas Goedert injury, Smith had 44 yards or fewer. Cold weather, possible wind, game flow concerns. Eagles adjust to opponents' weaknesses. A lot expecting more running game this week against Chicago. So we'll go Smith under 55.5 receiving yards, as well as the Cooper play.
Nice. And I can't help but think that might tie in just a little bit with your pro Mahomes stance in the MVP market, not expecting the Eagles passing game to do a ton of damage, or at least as much as the market might think, against a pretty horrific Bears defense this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of the handicap is that is the Goddard coming back. It's really going to affect Smith, I think, more than any other receiver for this team. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't help to have like some wind, some cold weather, 9-point favorite. It doesn't hurt for sure.
Got it. Well, speaking of personnel changes, I will use that angle to inform a prop bet that I'll go ahead and make official right now. I'll lock in Drake London, longest reception over 18.5, good up to -120, which is widely available right now. Just with Desmond Ridder, I think taking some more shots. I know there's quite a bit of variance in this. I don't want to bank on London getting, a bunch of big receptions and perhaps getting over his receiving yardage total for the whole game. I know it can feel square to have that thought that all it takes is one play to hit this bet. But I feel like this week of every week this season, with the new quarterback for Atlanta, this is probably the most likely opportunity that we're going to see for London to go over this total season to date. So I'll go ahead and play Drake London, longest reception, again, over 18.5 yards, good up to -120. And Hitman, of course, we're going to talk some teasers as well. Quick recap of last week, went 1-1. I think I flew a bit too close to the sun trying to get Tampa Bay involved as a non-Wong teaser leg. So lesson learned on that front. Going to look for some more of the classic Wong teaser legs this week and moving forward. And it starts for me with a 6.5-point teaser given this week's board. That 6.5-point teaser good up to -130. Let's go with the Eagles -2.5 at the Bears and the Patriots +7.5 at the Raiders. For the Eagles, I think it's quite simple, just looking for the vastly superior team to do little more than win outright. And for the Patriots, there's a good bit of familiarity between these head coaches, Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, and I think that gives us a subtle edge in reducing variance a little bit, which is always nice when we're taking an underdog up through a touchdown in a teaser. Also, Mac Jones and that Patriots passing offense showing some signs of life on Monday night. If they can continue that forward after a week in which they stayed out west, a bit of an in-season minicamp to build on things. Some upside for the Patriots offense that I hadn't been seeing in previous weeks. Overall, I think Patriots-Raiders probably going to be a close game. No surprise at all if the Patriots win it outright. Hitman, any thoughts on that 6.5-point teaser? Eagles -2.5 at the Bears, paired with the Patriots +7.5 at the Raiders.
Yeah, that would probably be the one that I would look toward. I mean, value-wise, that's the best one. You're getting from 9, you're getting that key half point on the 6.5-point teaser from the 3 to 2.5. And then with New England, you're going from the 7 to 7.5, which is what you have to do. So, I mean, value-wise, that's pretty much textbook.
I would like to say that there's more to consider this week. It's really slim pickings if we're looking at other options to cross through 3 and 7. I had Detroit +7.5 noted prior to recording, but per the breaking news that you noted, now I'm seeing the latest numbers, Lions -1. So I guess the Jets now would fit that range of a 6.5-point teaser candidate. Zach Wilson presents all kinds of variants, but the Jets defense, a big step up in class for what the Lions offense has faced recently, especially with Jared Goff in some less than ideal conditions. So when it comes to, I guess, the hierarchy, Eagles -2.5, Patriots +7.5, or now the Jets up to +7.5 hosting the Lions. Hitman, how would you stack those three options for this week's teaser card? 6.5-point teasers looks like the way to go.
Jets, I'm probably going to stay clear of just because I think that Zach Wilson brings a lot of variance into this game. I mean, he's just been so turnover prone and everything. Plus, you have the locker room. I mean, it's got to be a blow for them. It seems like they love Mike White and they don't love Zach Wilson. So now they get Zach Wilson back this week. And you know what? I saw some books, the Jets have went up to a 2-point underdog also. So, yeah, I mean, the Jets aren't my favorite teaser look this week.
Yeah, and to your point, with all the variance, that's something to definitely pump the brakes on. And with the way the market's moving, you're probably not going to need to pay the extra 10 cents for a 6.5 point teaser. At a certain point, if you do have the stomach for the Jets, they'll probably be available as a 6-point teaser leg. I will just leave it at this. You are on your own to find another 6-point teaser leg if you would like to pair anybody with the Jets on this Week 15 card. So a rapid fire recap for the props and hops Week 15 portfolio. Hitman on Amari Cooper under 57.5 receiving yards, as well as Devontae Smith under 55.5 receiving yards. I'm on Drake London, longest reception over 18.5, good up to -120, as well as a two-team 6.5-point teaser, good up to -130, pairing the Eagles -2.5 at the Bears with the Patriots +7.5 at the Raiders. At this stage, we'll go ahead and weave in the hops as we always do this time each week. Jacob, let's lead off with you. Anything on tap this weekend beyond the Christmas market that you spoke to on Tuesday's episode of Between the Lines?
Other than that, I'm going to a dinner at an Italian restaurant. So I guess the best thing to pair that with, I guess if they have Peroni available, a nice Italian beer just for the occasion, I'll have that. But maybe I'll also dive into some white wine to go with my Italian food. But other than that, yeah, going back to the Christmas market, I'm hoping they have some mulled wine so I can report back to you and Suma about how I feel about that. We know Suma likes it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably going to botch the pronunciation, but I think the German word is Glühwein, translates essentially to like mulled wine for us English speakers. So plenty to come on that front for sure on next Tuesday's episode of Between the Lines with Suma. In my neck of the woods, no mulled wine in the cards for this weekend. I touched on it on our episode with Suma on Tuesday. The Black Rose Old Fashioned is going to be a go-to once again for me this week at my neighborhood bar while I am watching the Dolphins take on the Bills on Saturday night. But from a hops perspective, tonight the go-to is going to be a beer called Triple Dry Hopped Art is Hard Green Label. This is a triple dry hopped hazy IPA by North Park Beer Company out of San Diego. Clocks in at 7% ABV. And I'll just say California shipping is the gift that keeps on giving. This one was delivered to my door yesterday. And Jacob, I think it's probably right up your alley. It's got 4 hops, Motueka, Nelson, Simcoe, and Citra. I haven't tasted this one yet, but based on that hop bill, it's basically saying to expect notes of citrus, stone fruit, some tropical vibes as well. Basically a vacation in a glass. So definitely looking forward to that one.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. I thought as I read the description and I was placing the order that it would be one, if they could ever do international shipping, let alone out-of-state shipping, then you might be placing an order for a 4-packer to yourself. But Hitman, tonight, if I'm going to be essentially drinking a vacation in a glass, it sounds like you had a vacation on a Tuesday this past week, heading to New York City with your fiance. And based on your tone when running through the itinerary last week, I cannot wait to hear about how that trip went for the two of you.
Yeah, it was a good time. A little romantic, nice stuff like ice skating at Rockefeller Center and the Mariah Carey concert, all that fun stuff for the woman. So it was a good time. And now I just get back to, I feel like I'm just the worst guest in the world because it's every Friday, Saturday. What are you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm going to Atlantic City betting. Then I'm going to maybe try to sneak in 9 holes and then bet more on Saturday. But that's the schedule when you're betting full time, just trying to get down. I mean, I say it all the time. The easy part is to know how to win and what to win on and everything. The hard part is getting down. That's where a lot of the time ends up getting put to. So it's just going to be another weekend of getting down on bets. And then maybe I'll give you something a little more entertaining next week when we got Christmas Eve on Saturday and Christmas on Sunday.
Sounds good. We'll look forward to it, but I can certainly appreciate the structure and discipline that it takes to really showcasing the mark of a pro. So no need to feel apologetic in any sense there. We'll let you get to Atlantic City shortly to go ahead and get down. Looking forward to this NFL Week 15 card, plus college football bowl season picking up. I'd imagine that's on your radar as well. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up with that. If you're not doing so already, I'd highly encourage you to follow Hitman on Twitter at Hitman428. You can also find me there at mlandis18. One quick programming note, I touched on it accidentally earlier, but Between the Lines with Suma, Jacob, and myself, probably going to be next Tuesday, once again next week, a day early as we did this week, working through some holiday scheduling. So look out for it by subscribing to Props and Hops wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll have Between the Lines hit your feed as soon as it's published. Want to thank everybody for tuning into today's episode of Props and Hops. Enjoy Week 15 in the NFL, and best of luck with your betting and beer adventures this weekend.